And Abu Hanifa said, no, I don't go to see any scholar, I'm not a student of anybody, or I was going to the market because I'm a businessman. Okay? And then Imam Shafi'i basically just said what I just told you, and then they depart, and then they split company. And Abu Hanifa, he says about this incident that inspired him to start gaining knowledge, he says that فَوَقْعَ فِي قَلْبِي مِنْ قَوْلِهِ وَتَرَبْتُ لِإِخْتِلَافِ فِي الْأَسْوَاقِ وَأَخَذْتُ فِي الْعِلْمِ فَنَفَعَنِي اللَّهُ بِهِ فَنَفَعَنِي اللَّهُ بِهِ, which means that after he said the statement that I see in you a keen attentive mind, and I see that you're an active person, he said that is if something affected my heart. Okay, something from his saying, it affected my heart. So I stopped frequently visiting the marketplaces, and I started to devote myself to knowledge. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he benefited me by this man, Imam Shafi'i. And just something else I missed that's important as well. Obviously he was called Abu Hanifa, and that's what he's famous by. But he did, usually when you say Abu Hanifa, you're saying father of Hanifa. Okay, but he had no child called Hanifa. It was just a kunya that he had, and it's taken from the verse in the Quran. What tabi' millata Ibrahim Hanifa, that follow the way of Ibrahim, who followed it upon a righteous manner. And a few other statements about his family before we carry on about his early life that are important is that he was obviously Persian. He was not from the Arab, and this is also very significant because a lot of the great scholars, in fact the majority of the scholars at that time, they were not Arab. Okay, they were mostly freed slaves or from people entering the Deen. They weren't Arabs as such. Okay, and he was obviously, his family was never a slave, and there's a long statement by his son Ismail saying this, but inshallah I won't go through this now. And his father Thabit was a righteous man, and his father, Abu Hanifa's grandfather, was someone who had good relations with Ali radiallahu anhu. And it is said that his father Thabit, he once went to Ali radiallahu anhu and said to him, look, pray for me and for my family. And Ali radiallahu anhu prayed for him and his family. And it is said that it's from this prayer that Ali radiallahu anhu did, that they had someone like Abu Hanifa, who the scholars have described, Imam Dhahabi described him as clearly one of the most intelligent people of the son of Adam. After the incident with Imam Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, at that time, he initially thought to devote himself to fiqh, but for some reason that's not quite clear, he began to specialize in Ahlul Kalam. And people of Kalam were generally those people, who were good at debating. Okay, because their debates were basically how to defend the religion, how to defend Islam. Because in those times, many sects began to arise. Okay, many types of weird ideas began to arise. So what these people used to do, they used to specialize in how to defend the Muslims, how to defend people from these type of thoughts. Okay, and he says that he started to do this. He became so proficient in this that whenever there was any type of problem like this, whenever there was any type of funny idea, he would go and debate with the guy until such that people began to fear him in his debate. He was very intelligent in the way he used to debate. And he said that most of the people of Kalam were in Basra, and he said that I went to Basra more than 20 times. Okay, and sometimes I would stay there a year, sometimes I would stay more than that, just so I could debate with these people. And it was as if that whoever he debated with, he would win. But eventually he saw that the people of Kalam, they had certain problems. Okay, the first thing he saw was that the Sahaba, this was not their way. Okay, the way of the Sahaba was that they would devote themselves to the practicalities of Islam, i.e. fiqh. Okay, people would come for them for fatwas, and they would give fatwas. It wasn't this thing about debating. Okay, this was the first thing that made him leave the debating. Okay, second thing he realized was that people of debate generally, right, they had they had hard hearts, they had bad character, they had rough tongues, and the problem with debating is that if you debate a lot, right, and if you see this character generally, people who debate a lot, right, it eventually starts affecting their heart. Okay, because you want to win. Okay, you know, debate somebody, you want to win, and it starts getting personal. Okay, and these people, you know, he saw that these people, a lot of them had this type of characteristics. While the people of fiqh, for example, they had, you know, they were different. Their character was better. They had, you know, they weren't known to abuse. They were people who were devoted to worship, and which is close to the actions of the Sahaba. And the third thing that was the tip of the iceberg, as they say, was that once a woman came to him and said to him that, asked him a certain matter about divorce. And he didn't know. He didn't like try to bluff. He didn't try to fob her off. But he asked her something about divorce and he didn't know. And in his vicinity there was a person called Hamad, who was a known faqih, recognized faqih, scholar of fiqh. So he said to her, look, go to Hamad, ask him the question, and whatever he tells you the answer, tell me as well, so that I may learn from this as well. Okay, so he didn't doubt that Hamad knew the answer, but he knew that he didn't know the answer. So she went to Hamad, asked him the question, and Hamad gave the answer and came back to gave her the answer, and she came back to him and told him. And then he thought that this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to leave Ahlul Kalam, I'm going to leave this debating, and I'm going to devote myself to fiqh. So now that Abu Hanifa, now that he's entered learning knowledge properly, I just want to mention some of his teachers, because if you look at any great person, you'll see that he'll be inspired by great people who are around him. Maybe these great people won't be mentioned so much. Maybe it's a great characteristic in one person, and one and then another, then another, then another, and all of them come together in this one person. But it's without doubt that you are like your company. And Prophet ﷺ said so as well, obviously in a hadith, that you are like the company that you hang around with, and you will be raised up with the company that you hang around with. It is said that his teachers, they're a humongous number. Okay, some say 44,000, some say less than that. But his teachers, they were a humongous number. Okay, but so inshallah we'll concentrate upon a few of them, and we'll talk about some of the characteristics. So inshallah we can see, so we can learn something from that as well. And just before I carry on, later on in his life, his foremost and most important teacher was someone called Hamad. Okay, Hamad, he was a recognized faqih in Kufa, as I've already described to you. And Hamad ibn Sulaiman, who died 120 Hijri, he was the main student of Ibrahim al-Nakhai, who gained knowledge from a number of Sahaba, but amongst them the most prominent one amongst them was Abdullah bin Mas'ud. And Ibrahim al-Nakhai. And Abu Hanifa, he says that in total he spent with Hamad 18 years. Okay, but he says about his time with him, he says that basically that initially when I joined him, I would sit with I sat with the newcomers. Okay, but after a little while Hamad saw that this man, he was gifted. And as all teachers, when they see somebody who's gifted or who spends a lot of energy, they make him come forward. Okay, and he made him sit with the most recognized people. Eventually, Abu Hamad made him sit right in front of him. Okay, and it became known that Abu Hanifa was one of his foremost students. And after 10 years, right, Abu Hanifa, and 10 years is a long time. That's basically 2 medical degrees. 2 MBBSs for those of you who study medicine. He goes that he thought, Abu Hanifa thought that now I've gained enough knowledge, now it's time for me to start my own circles. Okay, so on that day he comes into the main mosque of Kufa, and there he sees his teacher Hamad, and he says that when he saw Hamad giving this lecture, he said that I couldn't do it. I just couldn't start my own lecture. No, not now, not the way he saw. It's something I respect for Hamad. He couldn't do it. So he sat down and he began to listen to Ahmad like he always did. And on that very day, he says that one of Hamad's relatives passed away in Basra. Okay, so Hamad was therefore therefore he had to go to Basra, to deal with this matter of the inheritance, because he was the only one who could deal with it. So Hamad, before he left, he says to Abu Hanifa that you take my place as teacher, and you teach, you take my place. So you see, subhanAllah, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he blessed Abu Hanifa in that something that he wanted to do, he made him do it in a way that was much better than that. And that was to start his own class, but with the permission of Hamad, and also with the supervision of Hamad. Okay, so Hamad, he then goes for roughly 2 months, and people asked him questions. Okay, and whatever question he knew that he heard from Hamad, he'd give the same answer. But he says that people came with him with 60 new questions, and of those 60 questions, and all those 60 questions, he wrote down the question, he wrote down the answer. So that when Hamad came back, he told them about every single one of those 60 questions. And he says that Hamad, he agreed with me with 40, and he disagreed with me in 20. And then he said, then Abu Hanifa said that by that I knew that there was still a lot of knowledge in Hamad that I didn't have. And also he says that, it says with this that sometimes I would go to Basra, right, thinking that I know a lot of stuff, I know a lot of knowledge. Okay, because Hamad was pretty much the main authority in the Kufa at the time. And people would be asking questions that he just didn't know. And we'd go back to Hamad, and Hamad would know the answer to these questions. So he knew that Hamad, he still had a lot of knowledge to give. And he remained his student for a further 8 years. In fact, he says that when he came back after this Basra event, he says that he said to himself that I will remain Hamad's student until he passes away. I will remain his student. I don't care. He has more knowledge than me. He's clearly the one who's more superior than me, and I will remain his student. And he remained his student until Hamad passed away, which is 8 years after that. So therefore, which is 120 after Hijri, and therefore he is a student totally for 18 years. So what we can learn from this, the main thing we can learn from this is that to gain the knowledge that Abu Hanifa gained, he wasn't just sitting around. Okay, he was his main student. He was recognized his main student after 10 years, and for a further 8 years he devoted himself for it. So this knowledge, this deen, this inheritance from the prophets is only gained by striving. And he would say afterwards, Abu Hanifa, he would say afterwards, about Hamad when he passed away. And this is something that he would obviously say to teach his students, okay? He would say, Wallahi, ma da'awtu li waliday bil maghfirah illa da'awtu li Hamad. Wa ma dhakartu waliday illa dhakartu Hamada. Which means that I swear to you by Allah that I never made dua for my parents for forgiveness except I made dua for Hamad. And I never remembered Hamad. I never remembered my parents except I remembered Hamad. This was the amount of respect his teacher Hamad he had in the heart of Abu Hanifa. And this also shows you the respect that we need to gain out. We need to give our teachers as well, whoever they are. That they deserve respect because they are more. They have gained this inheritance of the prophets, and especially the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.